So evolution, I'm not really too informative on evolution. I think we
Do
learned
you
about it
believe
in
it?
school. I believe I believe in like it's hard because I believe in like a change of like a adaptation, I guess you could say. You know, like the
So you believe in adaptation?
yeah.
Okay, so if you Google the definition of adaptation or evolution, they're interchangeable. They'll usually have each other's words in the definition.
hmm But isn't evolution a change of a kind?
Evolution is basically the mishap of it's so if you think of the universe starting as domino effects, the same reason planets form. We actually just
Mhm.
witnessed the first galaxy form maybe a week ago. I made a video on it. We finally saw space dust just eventually turn into a planet. Did that evolve? It's just things happening. It's not necessarily like Pokemon. Things don't
Mm.
change just and it's not conscious. Evolution isn't something that's going, that's good, let me keep that. It's like, for example, tigers have white spots in the back of their ears. Not because tigers one day were like, hey, I'm going to grow white spots in the back of my ears. The ones that had like the freckle that was the white spot survived more because it seemed like they had eyes on the back of their head. Things walked up behind them and got them less, meaning those ones reproduced more. So now most tigers have spots in the back of their ears.
Gotcha. So that's kind of like the thing. When I think of evolution, I think of what it talked about where there's this book that I remember. It might have been the oh, man, I can't remember, but it talked about us being fish at first.
Oh,
We
yeah.
we came to land and you know we were fish, and then we evolved into primates, and then from primates into humans. And
So
so
there's a
when
couple
we
more steps in between there. There's a little, there's like all certain different types of primates. It's really interesting. We have a lot more links than people think, and it's like, okay, I have this analogy I want to give people. Like if you saw some footprints on a path, and some of them were obscured by tire tracks or puddles in the mud, but there were enough footprints to the end of the path from the beginning of it that you can infer somebody walked across the path. Some footprints are gone. It doesn't mean he flew. It doesn't mean he magically teleported. It just means those are missing. The evidence isn't there. So it's just like the puddle that's covering up one of the footprints. It's not like it didn't happen. It
is
sounds
yeah
really
okay
crazy to think that you came from a fish, but
yeah, no, that's why it's theory, right? Because it's not actually proven yet. Is that
well,
correct?
gravity is also a theory, but and so pick something up and drop it. If you drop it 10
Correct.
times, you're going to think gravity. Are you still going to think gravity is a theory if it drops to the floor 10 times?
No, no, yeah, you're right, and that's the same thing, I guess, with magnetism too. That's also a theory. We don't know
Most of
exactly
these
how it
things are
truly works.
theories. I don't think
Yeah.
anything can be objectively proven to anybody because the ability to ingest evidence is also subjective. The evidence itself isn't.
Okay. So real quick, going back to what we were talking about, like you brought up tigers and how like they've changed over time. That's the thing that like I'm still trying to work on, where a tiger never turned into anything else besides a better version of a tiger, right? But when we speak of humans,
That's
you know,
because you
there's
have the
missing.
final version of it.
Hmm.
You have to think of all the other things that okay, so I'll say it this way. A lot of people go dinosaurs are birds. That's not right. Birds are dinosaurs. You're missing the fact
Hmm.
that a bunch of different things that were almost tigers turned into that tiger, and now that tiger's doing the same thing. You
Hmm.
don't see the evolution happening now because of how slow it happened, but when you consider how long it's taken
Hmm.
and the correlation to why we have definitely witnessed evolution in human lifetimes observed. There's an island that had birds that people watched evolve over time, but you can see
Hmm.
why that it's not like Pokemon. It's not this driven force it's driven by success, but not from an agent of success. There's nothing picking it. So when things are,
Okay.
so you change, like your hair color is going to turn gray probably. You are different than you were whenever you were 13. Um, it's just cells multiplying, dividing based on the DNA code that they're given, and that changes each time that you reproduce with a different species that had a different set of environmental circumstances, which their parents had to work around, and they had to work around. Their grandparents had to work around. Evolution across every time you look at something alive, look in the environment it is, and you can see why. Like it's far more unlikely for a creator to make it seem like everything was designed for the environment is in.
Mhm.
If
Um,
evolution was true, what would the evidence look like?
correct. Yeah, those are good points. I guess I gotta do more research in evolution. That's just again how far my knowledge goes. Um, I guess the next one is Jesus is a fraud. Now, I am a Christian, and I'm not gonna bash you for your beliefs or anything because I grew up in an atheist household, and um,
Me too.
you know, I oh, okay, so that's kind of where I get my knowledge from of what the evolution is. My stepdad had a little library on stuff like that, and that's where I got the fish one. He also had a book about like the human genome. I think that's what it was called. And then of course he had a lot of books on is like Jesus for atheists, the Bible misquoted. He had what's that? He's a real famous atheist. He wrote
Is
the
it
God
talking about the God
Delusion.
delusion? Yeah, you're Richard
Yes, he
Dawkins.
had the yes, Richard Dawkins, and he had like other books that Richard Dawkins has wrote, and then there's other books that talk about you know what is it called, like just religion in general, just other religions. And so I kind of grew up around that, and I think when I met my actual father is when I first started learning about Jesus. But he's something like you just kind of go to church and hear about it. But it wasn't until like a few years ago where I really started reading about Jesus and learning about his not just his teachings, but what he claimed, um, what he uh, what he taught, and all those things like that. So that's when I really started diving in head first on that. And
And when was that?
this is so I started doing this back in 2020. I had gotten out of the military at that time, and so I had a lot of time on my hand. And 3 years passed by is when I had given my life to Christ. So, yes, sir. Oh,
And so, what would be the reason that you have put your faith in Jesus?
absolutely. Yeah. So I put my faith in Christ. Well, one, because when I first started learning about Christ, I was kind of going through a difficult time, which everybody really goes through. And what really hurt me was knowing that even though I believed in Christ, all these bad things still happen. Right. Family, I still lost family, even though I prayed, so what was the point? I started asking these type of questions when I started learning about Christ. But when I became a Christian, was still happening. And what Christ did was he gave me a foundation for when these bad things do happen that I won't, absolutely lose my mind. He brings peace, of course. And there's a verse that says he takes the sting of death away. So when it comes to death, I'm no longer. And once I was questioning about it, I wasn't really too afraid about it, but I really wanted to know, hey, this is something that's promised me in the afterlife. So that's where my faith is in Christ.
So do you believe he's God?
There's some passages that where he claims to be Christ. So from what I've gathered, I do believe that.
So I'm gonna backstep here a little bit. When you say that you were an atheist and that these were the reasons that you came to Christ, so I was an atheist for 23 years, and those are the exact same reasons that I did exactly what you did. So I don't like to. I wasn't going to be a lukewarm Christian. I mean, like I've read every
Yeah.
single last word of the Bible a million times. I've like 35. freaking hardback covers of it. Tons of them just in my car alone. Like, so one thing that you're going to come to find is that everybody has this similar story of where they just couldn't take it anymore and blah, blah, blah. That's what happened to me too. So
Uh-huh.
I take so much in on studies, and there's these studies done from people who are given PEDs and placebos and
All right.
nothing. So they're doing the same, like obviously it's a control, they're all doing the same workouts, they're measuring it all right. It's a good study. But the results were that the placebo basically did like 10 to 2% less than the PEDs, while the people who didn't take anything did way worse. So the idea is that the placebo can basically make people almost as good as actually being on steroids,
Mm-hmm.
because the placebo does something incredible in the mind that people aren't entirely sure, like neuroscientists aren't entirely sure yet, and maybe they are and I'm just not informed. But so this idea that you have this thing to fall back on,
Mm-hmm.
do you believe that it's because you know it to be true, or it feels better than the alternative, which would be, like you said, nihilism?
Okay, that's a great question. At first, I think that's kind of what it was. What you're saying, where it's kind of like, hey, this is a better alternative than atheism and nihilism. Uh, but I don't. I guess I don't really see it that way no more. And what I mean by that is, um, it's actually the teachings now that I'm starting to really believe in. So not necessarily about death anymore. That's no longer a problem in my life. But what I see is through Christ's teachings that the world it can be a better place. However, we know that that'll never happen because in the Bible it does say that the world is fallen. And so what I'm trying to get at is, it's he says to love your enemy. That's we can love anybody, we can forgive anybody. That's easy. But what does it come to when somebody's hurting you, or somebody goes against you in certain things or tries to hurt your heart? We can return fire with fire, but he doesn't teach that. And so that lesson right there has changed my life when it comes to speaking with other atheists. uh, and you probably know what I mean by sometimes their heart can be hardened. You know what I'm saying? When, like, right now, what me and you are doing is we're having a discussion. With most people that I've talked to, it's been more of like an anger, and all I do is I just try to speak. And I notice they don't really believe in that teaching of, like, well, I don't know how to explain it.
Well, so the
Anyways, what
reason
I'm
that
trying
I
to
would
say
say
is,
they don't believe the teaching would be because if you believe Jesus is God and you claim the world can be a better place because of what he teaches you, that's
mhm,
moving the goalpost from the idea that if he's God and God is all powerful, then he doesn't have to have a fallen world that his teachings would make better, because he doesn't need to have a world that isn't just good.
mhm. Okay. So you're saying because he's all powerful, right? There should never been like this fall.
There was never a fall. As far as all of the evidence suggests, the universe has been chaos from the beginning, and so is the Earth.
Yeah. So when we read in the beginning of Genesis, it talks about Adam and Eve, and then the world fell. What do you mean by chaos since the beginning?
Because so the reason we exist is entirely due to uncircumstantial, non-predictable chaos that is ensued from eternal emotion. There is matter cannot be created or destroyed. The Big Bang
Oh,
is not
okay.
a claim to be nothing from something. It's everything exists forever. It's eternal and it's contracting and shrinking just infinitely. And along those times of all of everything in the universe bouncing around into each other, we pop up, and that's why we're here.
Mhm. Is so your claim, or if I'm trying to understand you correctly, is that there was never actually a beginning. Everything was always was.
Well, yeah, the Big Bang. There's no scientific models that I'm subscribed to or familiar with that claim that there was nothing.
Okay. Now, what you just said, where do you get that from?
What do you mean? Where do I get that from? I get
So
that
you
from
said,
people have a misconception of the Big Bang. It's not a claim that everything popped out of nothing in this bang. It's everybody knows it's a
mhm,
singularity. Everything was heavily compressed, and the reason it was heavily compressed for it to expand again is there's two laws here that we're concerned about. Matter cannot be created or destroyed, and there is an equal or opposite reaction to blah blah blah. So if the universe
mhm.
has been expanding and shrinking forever, it's gonna do that forever, and that's what we observe.
And so right
And
now, like when we
yeah, the
look
universe is
into
expanding.
space, and it's expanding, and so what's going to happen eventually? It's going to shrink. Is what you're saying?
So if you pull a rubber band, and this is a really loose analogy, but if you have a rubber band stationary and then you start pulling it, you can't pull it forever. What's gonna happen? It's gonna snap, or it's gonna shrink back in on itself.
Hmm.
The likeliness of the universe snapping like a rubber band is really small. That's why we observed the Big Bang and we observed this 15 billion years.
Obviously, I like my greens, but greens
Oh, I love
alone.
greens.
Yeah. And then I guess the last one, the Bible's false. Uh, I guess we can go into that one if you want to start.
I will ask you: have you read the entirety of the Bible?
Man, I haven't. I haven't read the entirety of the Bible. I'm working on it right now, but as you know, it can be kind of difficult.
So where are you at?
So I finished the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. I finished Judges. What else did I finish?
So you got
Uh,
past all those books and
all the
you're still you're still on board.
Well, so yeah, so I got past those. I've read the entirety of the New Testament, which is kind of where I started. And then I've read Joshua, which is, one of those difficult books. And then I've read Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. So that's where I'm at.
So what? So you didn't. So if you so a lot of people I talk to haven't even read all of that. With that being said, the fact
Yeah.
that you've actually read all of that and you might not know what we're gonna get. So you've read Deuteronomy, like like the law books.
Yes, yes, those ones I struggle with a little bit. I do plan on going over them again because they can get real, I guess you could say dry, for a lack of a better term.
What is that? What
They
do you define that as?
like it's like going over, hey, don't do this. Don't do this. If you do this, make sure you do this,
Okay.
and then this person. You know what I'm saying?
So
Just
you
kind
don't
of
think
that.
there's
That's
any
what.
laws that are questionable?
Yeah, there's some that I've thought about. It's like this is, why. But I know that when I've read the gospel, it does speak of Christ fulfilling all those things, so that those things are no longer necessary.
So that would be false. Keyword in that
Okay.
passage being fulfill. So fulfill
Uh huh.
doesn't mean the same thing as abolish. And when Jesus says this, he says, I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it.
Uh huh.
Meaning it's not going to go away. And he also says the law is not going to pass away until heaven and earth. Not one stroke of the writings of the law will pass away until heaven and earth like disappear. So until the earth
Hmm.
and the universe is gone, Jesus is telling you to follow the law. He tells you those who teach the law will be called greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Those who don't teach you the law will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And if you
Hmm.
believe Jesus fulfilled the law, that's another problem. He gave the law and he came to fulfill it, which is really that's just a weird thing. But the problem here is there's a law in Deuteronomy 22:13
Hmm.
through 21. It goes over a marriage ritual where the woman would have to consummate the marriage the night that they got
Hmm.
married, and the man would have to go into her, and they needed to prove that she was a virgin, and so they would lay this cloth on the bed.
Hmm.
And if she doesn't bleed on this cloth, then she's to be stoned in her father's doorway, specifically in her father's doorway. And this is a law given by God. The problem
Hmm.
is We absolutely for a fact know maybe 45% of women bleed their first time. Some women break their hymen on horses. It just happens.
Hmm.
So, unequivocally, this is a law that definitely got innocent women stoned. Unless you can think of some biological reason that 100% of women back then only bled from intercourse, which is
Hmm.
a very big stretch. There's plenty of things in the Old Testament that we can go over, like King David, for example. His sin
Hmm.
with David sins and he doesn't get punished. 10 of his
And with
wives,
Bathsheba.
yes, 10 of
Uh-huh.
David's wives. Well, I'm sure you know the punishment that David's son, you know that part of the punishment?
Yeah, he lost his son.
Do you know the other part of the punishment?
I don't recall.
Okay, so the main part of the punishment is that God says, so David did this without anybody seeing. So I, the Lord, am going to take your wives and have them put in broad daylight in public for everybody to see, for people to take advantage of, you know, the R word.
Hmm.
And this is a Second Samuel. I'll put it in the chat. I have it somewhere here. This passage is really difficult because God basically just has 10 women, GRA, yeah, and because David did something.
Hmm. Okay.
And we can read the passages too, if you don't believe me. But
Yeah.
I have no reason to lie to
No,
you.
I believe you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you've been honest with me, so I appreciate that.
So this is an interesting thing: is if you believe Jesus is God, He gave the law, and if you believe Jesus fulfilled the law as He claimed, that means He stoned some woman in her father's doorway. If He didn't do that law,
Hmm.
He didn't fulfill it, right?
Okay. I think with this, I know there in the law, we have your ceremonial laws, we have your I think it's called ritual law, and then your moral law, which is the one that everybody knows, which is like the Ten Commandments. We know that that covenant was under Moses, and
That's
the
not true.
covenant is
Deuteronomy
a
6 says that God gave the laws, the Mosaic laws from Moses was the messenger.
yeah. So with that being the case, that law is for the Israelites, right? It's a conditional covenant with the Israelites. And so when we talk about faith, it'd be like, well, how did Abraham get to heaven if he didn't have the laws? How did the people before him get to heaven,
James tells
without those
you
laws?
this. James chapter 2 verses 20 to maybe 24, something like that. No, or maybe like 24
Uh-huh.
to 26. He talks about what Abraham specifically did, and he says it wasn't Abraham's faith. It was Abraham
Yeah,
literally slapping his kid up on the altar. He did something. He showed God its works. This is the entire book of James.
yeah. Faith without works is dead.
Yep.
Yes. So yeah, you're right. It showed his faith that, hey, I love you, and this is what I will do for you. And what did God do after that? He provided an actual sacrifice. He's saying, hey, look at what you would possibly have to do, but you don't have to do none of this because I'm going to give my son, right? So you don't have to. I've already given you a sacrifice, so you don't have to move forward with this. So it was his faith, but without works, you're right. It is dead. So it goes
So, but
hand
the
in
wages
hand.
of sin is death, and that's what the
Correct.
sacrifice was for. So, who sets
Correct.
the wages of sin?
That's God.
So, if God's all loving,
Hmm.
why would He set the wages of sin to be something so
Harsh.
infinite punishment for finite things?
Got you. Just give me a quick second to kind of put my thoughts together.
No, all good,
This
man.
is kind of my first time really. This is my first time really.
This is
I
like my
guess
second live.
defending my faith. Okay, cool, cool.
I don't even
Um,
know if everything's working right, dude.
no, it's good, man. I can hear you perfect, and everything's working pretty good. Um, so we know that you're right. The punishment of sin is death. That's the wages. Um, what it is that there has to be a way you have to pay for that. We can't. How are you going to pay for your sin? How would you think God would allow us to pay for our sin? Because there has to be a payment for it, right? So
So
that's
I'm
again
gonna,
where
not to jump in, but this is where I get caught up. Is so there's this presupposition that sin exists and something has to be done about it. So where does that
okay,
come from?
that is there something that has to be done about it?
Yeah, so there's this idea that sin does exist and something has to be done about it. And so why would sin
Hmm.
have to exist? And on top of it, if it does, why is the wages eternal torment?
I got you. I think that when it comes to sin, we know that it's transgression against the law. We know that it's and the law was written on our hearts. And so without you and I, without the Bible, you and I know the difference between right and wrong, right? We know that there's people that are probably crazy, whatever, like that. But you and I know that, it's bad to murder or it's bad to steal. These things are inherent. So, what do we do to forgive that? Or, like, what do we do to atone for those things? And so, that's kind of my question for your question, the first one. The second one was, why would he allow punishment for eternity? Well, the thing is that God is what we know is He's perfect. He's a holy God, so there can't be no sin around Him, right? Without there can't be darkness and light because it doesn't exist, right? So God, we read that He is light. He's perfect, and so if we're sin and we're not perfect, we cannot be in His presence.
So Isaiah
And
45:7 states, God explicitly states that He is the cause of the darkness.
okay,
All over the Bible, He's telling you the opposite of what you're saying. He's saying He causes the evil, He causes the distress. He is the light, He is the darkness. He specifically says, I create the evil.
hmm
And He
I
also
think that
permits Satan to do bad things. There's parts of the Bible where He specifically permits Satan to just, I forgot exactly what the situation was, but yeah,
like in Job,
that might be exactly what I'm thinking about, honestly. But if it's somewhere else, then it's somewhere else. I can't remember. I don't have my
yeah,
notes. They're in the car over there. I'm just sitting outside.
yeah. I was gonna say I gotta go get my Bible, but it's in my car, so I'm just kind of going off of memory. With Job, we know that and I don't know if you know this, but this is something I found interesting. But did you know that Job came before Genesis? It was because we know that Moses wrote Genesis, but the book of Job goes like the book itself was before Moses, before he wrote the creation, and so
Is
it
that
was
the
a.
stone tablet fragment that we have, or is that Numbers?
I'm not exactly sure. I don't know the answer to that. Um, but what we learn about in Job is that God gives. He doesn't give the devil, Satan, the power. He just lets Satan do what he wants. And Satan says, I'm a. This is your servant. The only reason he's praising you and worshiping you and giving you these things is because you got this protection around him. If you get rid of this protection, I can show you that he doesn't love you and that he'll curse you. And so God doesn't give Satan his power. God just lets Satan does what he wants. And what we find out is a lot of his friends were like, dude, God is striking down, he's striking down fire on earth and all these things. But we learned that that was actually Satan. So we learn about his power. We learn of that he can take life. We know that he can get into the hearts of people. And so throughout Job, what does Job do? He doesn't, he's obviously hurt, but he doesn't question anything about God. And this one right here is actually something real hard for a lot of us to believe or to take. But God never tells him why. God never gives a reason why this happens. He actually says, I am God. Like this is who I am, and that's all you need to know is that this is who I am. And so in the end of Job, we actually never find out why any of this stuff had happened. Right. And honestly, we never will. And I think that's one of the hard things about Christianity and believing in God is sometimes we'll never know why these things happen, but we need to know that God is in control of these things. And so when it comes to Satan, yeah, he has certain powers that a lot of us don't know about, and God allows him to come to and fro. So that's a hard one, and I don't have the answer for that.
Hmm. So, so from hearing what you heard earlier,
Hmm.
Do you still hold your position to say that God is holy, all good, all loving, perfect, despite him doing that to David's wives?
You know, you said all love, all loving, all good, but you forgot to mention all knowing. And I think that's a very important thing that we leave out, because if I was an all good and all loving God, I would stop that, right? I would stop all these things. But if I was all knowing, then I wouldn't change anything.
So I don't know if God's particularly all knowing. Throughout if you believe Jesus is God, Jesus doesn't know a lot of things. He often has to ask questions.
Hmm.
And if you believe God is all knowing, in the book of Genesis, he has to ask questions to Adam and Eve.
Hmm.
The book of Genesis, he has to ask Cable where's his brother.
Of
And
course.
he gets convinced by Moses at one point. There's a lot of things that indicate that he's more anthropomorphic, like if that's the right term. He's like human, like he's not shown
Hmm.
as being this concept of God, this omnipotent being that per we superimpose into the text.
Correct. Yeah, that's good. I think that well, actually, I don't think, but it says that in I believe it's in Romans that he gave up a lot of those powers to become human, right? And so that's what I think it's in Romans. It's either in Romans or Galatians that we read that. And kind of in some of Paul's writings, he brings that up a lot, is that God gave up his deity and his godliness to come in a form of a man. And so when we read Jesus, Jesus always talks about the Father. Well, the Father is greater than I. There's only one person that's good, and that's God. And so what he's really trying to show is that, hey, even though if in human we're what we read in the Bible is that we're fallen, and so he comes in that form, and so he has flesh on him, so he doesn't himself as a human know these things, but he gives everything to God, right? And so if we read, you ever heard of the rich young ruler in
Oh yeah.
Matthew? And so right before the rich young ruler, he's talking to the disciples. He says, who do people say that I am? And do you remember what they were saying?
Um, some of them say the Messiah. I think some of them say he's a good teacher or something.
Yeah, there some of them are like, hey, he's a good teacher. He's some say you're a prophet,
Okay.
right?
Oh yeah.
And
Sorry.
so that's yeah, no, you're good. And so that's what he's saying. And he says, well, who do you say that I am? So again, he's Jesus is asking questions. That's how he did most of his ministry. When the Pharisees and scribes were, they were debating or whatever, he all he did was really ask questions. He never like really was firm on answers. He just asked questions to make them think. And so he says, who do you say that I am, to the disciples, or to Peter? And what does Peter say? Do you know?
Um, does he? No, I don't know. Does he call him God or the Son of God?
He says, you're the Christ, right? You're the Messiah. And then he says, well, blessed are you, because God didn't, I'm sorry, flesh and blood didn't reveal that to you, but God did. And so what we learn is that these other people who claim who Jesus is, they don't know who he is because they don't spend time with him, right? They know that because they spend time with him. They look at his teachings, they see him go off and they pray. They left everything for him. And so when we go to the rich young ruler, what does the rich young ruler say to him? The first thing that he says to him, he says, hey, good teacher, how do I inherit eternal life? If he knew who Jesus was and if he spent time with him and knew his words, you think he would be calling him good teacher? Or would he be calling him, Christ is the Messiah? And so he calls him good teacher, and he asks all these questions. And when God gives him, or when Jesus gives him the answer, he turns away because it's a hard answer for that question. And so what I'm trying to get at is, that's the one part where it's like there's no one good except God. Well, if that man knew who he was talking to, he wouldn't have called him good teacher. He wouldn't have to said all those things. And so I guess what I'm trying to get around is that in order to know who Christ is, we have to know really who God is, and we know that God asks his questions. They most of the time, actually all the time they do know, but what they do is they'll question us so we can think about these things. That's again, that's what I've learned so far. So I hope that's a good answer for you.
I think that answer is. Are you just hinting at that they're claiming he's the Messiah?
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
what would your evidence that Jesus is the Messiah be?
The evidence that he's the Messiah is, I think, in Isaiah, it does talk about the Messiah. It says in, I believe it's either 53 or 54, where it talks about, man, you know what, brother? Man, I was gonna go get my Bible, man, because I don't have my Bible. That's
Is it the
crazy.
Isaiah 53 where they're talking about the piercing?
Can you? Yeah, I think it might. If you
I
can
know all about
read from verse.
Isaiah. It's just so none of Isaiah is about Jesus.
And why do you say that?
Because the book of Isaiah, if you read the book of Isaiah in context, there's absolutely no indication that it's not happening. The only indication that is that this is happening right now, and they tell you
Hmm.
what happens. So when you do read the book of Isaiah, when you're really like scholarly, like people who do debate this topic at a really high level, what
Uh
they
huh.
do is they have to say this is a dual prophecy, in that there's just another meaning in the text. Because if you just read Isaiah, there is no indication this is happening hundreds of years from now. It happened in the book, and they tell you about the person that was born. It was prophesied to King Ahaz. Like, it all happens in the book, Isaiah chapter 7, 8, and 9. Like, you just read a couple, you read those back to back, you'll never think it's Jesus because it's happening. Like, this stuff happens. And the translation doesn't say virgin, it says a young woman has conceived. It's not that she's like a virgin and then she's going to get magically pregnant. That's wrong. It's the young woman is bearing a child now. I guess is happening in the Hebrew.
Hmm. And what that's in chapter what again?
7.
Chapter
The
7.
Isaiah 7:14 is what a lot of Christians like to say is a prophecy about Jesus. But if you just sit down and read 7, 8, and 9, there, I don't see how somebody could think it's Jesus. And let alone if you've read the entire book of Isaiah, it's clear what's happening.
Within 9, are you talking about 9 6 through 7?
Yeah.
Yes, it talks about the wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice. From that time forward and forever, the zeal of the Lord of his hosts will perform this. And so,
Yeah,
if
so the
so, you're
beginning of Isaiah 9:6 is actually talking about the kid that was they were saying was being like born conceived of in Isaiah 7.
huh.
So if you read Isaiah 7, 8, and 9 just straight through, it's like happening. That's why you get the argument from Christian apologists that it's a dual prophecy. Keep in mind that
Mhm.
when the people were writing the Old Testament, stuff was happening and they were writing it down. They weren't exactly prophesying for events happening in the future. A lot
Okay.
of it is, but some events are not exactly that. Like, there can be a prophecy for in the moment that is being fulfilled too in the story.
Hmm. With Isaiah 53, you're saying this talks about the person in Isaiah 7.
No, it's not talking about the person in Isaiah 7. So there's Deutero Isaiah, and there's Isaiah. There's different authors that wrote the whole book of Isaiah. It wasn't written by one guy in one time period. And the later parts of Isaiah are about the suffering servant of Israel.
Okay, that's what you mean by dual. Okay.
No, no, no. What I mean by dual is that the Christians impose that this is one unified meaning behind this whole book. So they think 53 is attached to 7, which it's not. Their dual meaning is that Isaiah 7:14 is about the kid that's actually being talked about in the book of Isaiah, and it's also talking about Jesus. Because undeniably it's not about Jesus. It's a young woman is having a kid now, and then he exists. Like, so you have to change it to, well, underlyingly the author was apparently writing about Jesus thousands of years or hundreds of years later. That's the Christian's claim, because if you read Isaiah, it doesn't talk about Jesus necessarily.
Okay. Um, how would you dispute Isaiah 53?
Well, Isaiah 53, so it tells you who the servant is in the book of Isaiah over and over and over again.
Hmm,
So there
interesting.
is, let me see if I got it. I have a thing written out. So I have a lot of resources that I've uploaded on my profile. Not
Hmm.
trying to plug myself, but I have all of the verses. Yeah, it's usually my notes, but I'm on live.
I
So
got you.
there are, dang dude, I should have them. Yeah, so let me, so Exodus 32, your servants Abraham, Isaac, those are talking about, or and Israel. That's just another
Hmm.
preface. Let's go to Isaiah 42, 40 verse 2, because that's before, because we can't just skip to 53.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to, like,
Isaiah. You said Isaiah 40.
Yeah, Isaiah 40.
Okay. I
So
got my
if we
Bible.
read, oh, okay,
I'm
okay.
looking.
Oh, my,
No, you're good, brother.
so what translation are you using?
The NKJV.
Okay, so that's actually pretty good. I might have jumped over one. We'll go to 41 so I can go
Isaiah.
chronologically, because we're going to work our way up to, I actually just had one written wrong. There's nothing in Isaiah 42 about this. I don't think so. So don't. If I'm gonna save the live, and I'll send you the thing from my profile. But
Cool.
so Isaiah 41 8 to 9, it's another one of the I'll try to take us chronologically best as I can off my noggin, off the top of my head. So I
Okay.
think this is, I got a Bible too. I actually have a New King James version. So Isaiah 41 8 to 9. If you want to read it for 1 second, I'm literally gonna walk 5 feet away and grab this New King James version.
Yeah, for sure. Sense.
So what did you notice verse 8 said?
It said, "But you, Israel, are my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the descendants of Abraham, my friend." He's talking about, Jacob. He's chosen Jacob.
Yes, but what's he saying here?
Whom I have chosen, the descendants of Abraham. That he's chosen his descendants, Jacob's descendants.
So the
Is that
the
what you're
key the
saying?
key thing is verse 8 says, "But Israel, you my servant." So this is prefacing the thing that's going to happen later on. And we're going to
Hmm.
go through a couple more. I'm going to go, you want to turn to Isaiah 43?
Yeah, I got it. All right.
So if you just read from like, maybe 8 to 10.
It says, "Bring out the blind people who have eyes, and the deaf who have ears. Let all the nations be gathered together, and let the people be assembled. Who among them can declare this, and show us former things? Let them bring out their witnesses, that they may be justified. Or let them hear and say, It is the truth. You are my witnesses, says the Lord, and my servants whom I have chosen, that
Okay,
you may
so
know."
he's talking about his servant again.
Hmm.
Because I mean, well, you've read 53. We're getting towards the idea
Hmm.
here. So just turn to 44. Just like flip right over to 44 because it's talking about the servant again. I
Hmm.
think it's verse 1.
Yes, it says, "Yet hear now, O Jacob, my servant, and Israel, whom I have chosen." Do you
So
want me to continue?
no, that's basically you can maybe read down to verse 21 in this chapter.
Hmm. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, you can read it. Verse 20. It's the same chapter.
You said all the way to 20?
No, 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 just the verse 21 from 44.
Okay. It says, "Remember these, O Jacob and Israel, for you are my servant. I have formed you. You are my servant, O Israel. You will not be forgotten by me."
Okay, so then maybe we can go to Isaiah 45 verse 4.
It says, "For Jacob, my servant's sake, and Israel, my elect, I have even called you by your name. I have named you, though you have not known me."
So the person in this chapter doesn't know God and he's been named explicitly and God is in reinforcing that he's been named explicitly.
Hmm.
So turn to Isaiah 48 verse 20.
Okay. It says, "Go forth from Babylon, flee from the Chaldeans, with a voice of singing, declare, proclaim this, utter it to the end of the earth. Say, the Lord has redeemed his servant Jacob."
So when you get to 53, if you've read the book in context, what would make you think the child from 7, 8, and 9 would be Jesus? And why would you think that person's the same as this servant that is Jacob? So 7, 8, and
Hmm.
9 in these chapters, these are different people in and of himself in the book. And they're
Hmm.
both two different people from Jesus.
Hmm.
And both prophecies are like the kid was born and they talk about him and they tell you about how he like what he eats and stuff. It's you never get to 53 and go, man, that servant that they just said was Israel 100 times and that God just reinforced and what's the word I'm looking for? Reminded us again that it's Israel, like or Jacob Israel.
Hmm.
It's hard to get to 53 and go, okay, that's Jesus. But if you
Okay.
only read 53 and 7:14, you go, oh, that's Jesus.
Uh, I think I can see that. I think kind of where I got the notation was from with John the Baptist, where he talks about there's going to be the one crying out in the wilderness that we read from Isaiah. And so John the Baptist quotes that, and it's one of the Gospels he quotes that in, and that goes back to Isaiah 40, where it starts talking about that. And then when we go to, and he talks about, you know, the servant, behold my servant, whom I uphold, my elect one in whom my soul delights. I have my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to who the Gentiles. He will not cry out nor raise his voice, nor cause his voice to be heard in the street. A bruised reed he will not break, and smoking flax he will not quench. And so when I read all these things, that does kind of it does sound like a Jesus. And I would have to read all this because we did kind of like go over certain verses. When it comes to 53, um, it says, "Who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?" Right? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant and as a root out of a dry ground. What what flower can bloom out of dry ground? You know? You know what I'm saying? There's no
So
plant that comes from dry ground.
that's just the person's obviously not a plant. They're just speaking in metaphor.
Hmm.
And the metaphor isn't towards some figure that they didn't really know existed yet.
Well, what about the virgin birth?
So that there's no virgin birth.
Well, so what plant comes out of a dry ground? What baby can come out of a dry, a
Plenty.
womb
Well,
without
they
any?
lived in the ancient Near East. There's all kinds of plants that came out of the dry ground.
Okay. It says, and so when it speaks of 53, who do you think that they're talking about?
So all of the verses that we went over that said the servant, like all of the chapters right before 53 we went over that were saying who the servant was, that's who they're talking about.
Israel, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's where um, I think that can be, and again, I don't have nothing to truly back this up, so I'm just kind of speaking, just speaking really. But
From the Holy Spirit.
I think no, 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 not this right here, because I've seen the people, like the Jewish people of Israel nowadays, they take this and then they kind of do. We're like, hey, we're the servants of Israel. We're the ones that are being rejected. We're the ones that are being stricken by God. So they always say, hey, instead of worshiping, Jesus, we're the ones that you should be worshiping, right? So that's kind of where they, if you ever see that, this is kind of where they get that from.
I haven't really seen
And
that, but I think their idea there is wrong about, hey, obviously they're just being mean. I think they're
yeah,
getting a dig at the people who thought Jesus was the suffering servant. I think they're just
mm,
poking fun. The same way
okay,
that the sign above Jesus's cross that said King of the Jews, that was a mockery of Jesus, as well as the crown of thorns, because Jesus was never a king, and that was a there's a lot of requirements that the Jews who set the requirements for the Messiah to be that Jesus never fulfilled. Jesus never fulfilled one single messianic prophecy. Literally zero. That's why they mocked him. The people who wrote these books and got to say who was the Messiah literally tells the whole world that that guy's not the Messiah. They're still waiting for him.
hmm the and when we read, I guess in I don't know where this is from, if it is in Isaiah, but it talks about like they'll cast his you know which one I'm talking about. They cast his clothing for lots, or I don't know how it's worded, but they basically gambled over his clothing when he was crucified, and it mentions that in somewhere in the Old Testament and also in the Gospel when he's being crucified.
Okay, so they just
Um,
quote from the Old Testament a lot. That's what I'll tell you from that. So whenever Jesus is talking about this piece of bread will indicate who will betray me, and then he gives it to Judas.
mhm.
What that is it's a part of Psalms or Proverbs or something, and it's just a quote from a random part of something that is completely meaning something entirely different. Jesus is just saying something from the Old Testament. So when you go back and read what that part from the Old Testament is, it's doesn't say what it says. When you read the whole chapter, it's like, okay, when I get to what Jesus says, it has nothing to do with like somebody being crucified over this betrayal. It's just a random part of a song, like, and then it's over. There's no context anymore. It's just like, what? When you say it's mentioned
Okay.
in the Old Testament, yeah, it's mentioned in the Old Testament, but what's the Old Testament serves a purpose for an entire religious group, the people that exist and existed for hundreds of years before Christians. There are reasons that this text was written the way it is.
Copy. I got you. Um, well, I guess I got to study a lot more, look into it a lot more. What's your name?
My name is Zachary.
Zachary. I'm Julian, man. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, man.
I'll give you a follow, man, but I have to go, and I just appreciate the respect and the conversation that you brought. Um, I'm gonna do more research, and then one day I'm gonna get on here and we can talk more about it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I go live for maybe an hour or something every day or two.
Already,
I
bro.
had to go three. All right, bro. Yeah. So I have a YouTube channel too. I might, if I'm not live on here, it could be there.
What is the?
It's the same thing.
All right, copy. All right, Zachary, right?
Yep.
All right, Zachary. It was nice to meet you, man, and
It
you
was
have a
nice to
good day.
meet
All
you,
right.
man. You too.
Hey, you're gonna have to kick me out of this because I don't know how to get out of these things.
Yeah, 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 yeah.